What's up, everyone? How's it going? Today we'll be talking all about cube draft. Now, with the impending rotation followed by the announcement of Core 2.0, not only has the meta for standard play and cache refresh shifted, but also cubes moving forward will look very different. So, because of this, I've also shifted some of my attention towards cube design. And well, I ended up actually hosting a cube myself just today, or a few days ago by the time this video is uploaded. So, yep, to give an overview, today I'll start by giving some background and motivation for cube drafting, followed by explaining to you the things I discovered about the new card pool with Core 2.0 and post rotation in effect that I've learned through cube design. Finally, we'll go through a draft analysis of the draft that I hosted at my local game store. So to start off, why would you play cube draft over standard format? Well, the biggest reason by far is that it is something new and something refreshing. Judging from the survey that I did from Cache Refresh, I think a lot of players enjoy the simple fact that Cache Refresh is a deviation, just something completely different from standard Netrunner, which people can be getting tired of. Same thing with Cube Draft. It's a complete departure from standard constructed, and for this reason alone, I think it's very appealing to a lot of people. Not to mention that it's very easy for participants. They just have to show up with their basic starter cards and they can get into it immediately. So that's good for players who already own a majority of the cards or even the whole card pool. For new players, it's a bit harder. They can play a cube draft even without owning any cards. However, due to the sheer size of the current card pool, they might be a bit overwhelmed by the number of cards in the cube draft. But if you give them a bit of time, allow them to take their time in drafting their cards, things should be fine. If anything, Cube Draft is a great way to attract higher attendance at local stores because just because of the fact that this is something different, people will show up. And yeah, I actually managed to get a sizable number of people to show up at mine, so it's pretty good. Finally, I think one of the big reasons why Cube Draft is so appealing is that it is accommodating of players of a variety of skill levels. Sure, the skilled players will most likely, will win games more likely than not, but there's always some chance for the less skilled players to win. Every game feels like you always have some out. And whereas in standard play, with the difference in player abilities and how fine-tuned, how optimized the decks are nowadays, it sometimes can feel like you never stand a chance against pro players. This is not the case in Cube Draft. Everyone has a chance, and scorelines, or rather, leaderboards tend to be flatter as a result. And I think this is what appealed to a lot of players when Netrunner was in its infancy, and this is something you can recreate by playing Cube Draft. So, let me give you some background about Cube Draft. If you've been following this channel, you would know that I've actually hosted a Cube Draft in London almost exactly 1 year ago. This was, I think, around the Mumbat cycle, and yeah, it was a pretty good and successful draft in my opinion. So, basing off that, I'm doing it again this year, and last year I also uploaded a video on cube design and strategy. If you can't get enough of cube-related videos, be sure to check out the video I uploaded. The title's on the slide that you see right now. So there are two main Netrunner cube lists that are floating about the interwebs. The first is the Birmingham cube, authored by Xenesis, Xenesis. You can find his list on Meteor, and this is, in my personal opinion, the better of the two popular cube lists. The only problem with this is that it is outdated by one cycle. There are no terminal directive or Mars cycle cards, so you will have to do a bit of work to keep it updated. The other cube is the Stimhack cube, and it's updated up to Crimson Dust without Core 2.0 as of this recording. The problem with the Stimhack cube, I find, is that it is not very well balanced, in the sense that or rather, okay, balance is not the right word. Let me take that back. It encourages certain so-called unfun archetypes. To give an example, if you watch my previous YouTube video, the thoughts on cube design, you will see that two of the important cornerstones are that there shouldn't be too many hate cards, and that there shouldn't be you know win buttons, things that will just encourage players to stall out the game or to drag on the game too long. And the inclusion of cards like Magnum Opus or Blue Moose and let me think. Yeah, all these cards that just encourage the runner to just play very passively. It's not very good in my opinion. They also have quite a few hate cards in the form of like Film Critic, for example, and I don't think that is necessary in in a Netrunner cube. So if you want a nice balance and fun cube list, I would definitely recommend the Birmingham cube. And my cube that I'm about to present is based on the Birmingham cube itself. As I said, it is outdated, so I had to update it. This entailed swapping out the rotating cards with equivalents from the more recent cycles. And this turned out to be a very instructive experience for Core 2.0 and rotation, which is the main thing I want to talk about today. Because through this cube design experience, I've learned a lot about which cards are staying and going, and how the card pool has changed. What not factions, but what the runner and the corp has gained and lost. I would highly recommend you, if you have the time, to do a cube redesign of your own. Start with the Birmingham cube and try to modify it such that there are no more rotated cards left. It is like swapping an econ card for another equivalent econ card, and so on and so forth. Like restructure for IPO. Very soon you'll find that it's quite interesting. There are things you learn about how things have changed since rotation. Now, I started this project before Core 2.0 was announced, and I quickly gave up. Very soon I realized, I started with the Corp side, I realized that the draft was going to be completely unfun. Reason being, most of the 3-2 agendas would drop out, because without Core 2.0, all the project agendas were gone. This meant that there were no never advanced strategies, no fast advanced strategies, and the only way to score agendas was to advance them manually, at which point the runner will always steal them because there's no Caprice and no Ash. This would make for a terrible cube, because the only thing the corps will try to do is to tag and bag or to kill with net damage. That is not fun in my opinion. Core 2.0 changed that though. It made cube draft tenable, so it's really, really thankful that Core 2.0 actually became a thing. I'll now proceed to talk about some of the findings I've gathered for both the Corp and Runner side. We'll start with the Corp. The biggest change to the Corp cube is that Scorched Earth is dropped out. This is a very big loss for the tagging archetype. Previously, tags were quite high risk and high reward, in the sense that Scorched Earth is a win button, a win condition in itself. And it makes drafting very exciting, because you might spend an early pick just to deny someone else the Scorched Earth. With Scorched Earth out of play, however, I realized that tag and bag was no longer an archetype in my new cube draft. Reason being, the only other active meat damage card with tags with a tag condition is Traffic Accident, which is way too weak in power level, and Boom, which is way too powerful in power level. Again, my vision of cube draft is one where hate cards do not have to be played, and without hate cards like Plascrete or Sports Hopper, Boom is way too powerful. There's basically no... it's very, very hard to avoid a Boom. And even though there's no breaking news, it doesn't feel very fun if, taking 2 tags instantly loses you the game just because of the Boom card. So I didn't like Boom, and so as a result, there was no meat damage. Tags themselves have changed as well. As per the Core 2 Corp analysis video, I mentioned that tags are now very passive, no breaking news, no mid-seasons. So most of the tags, and I end up having to increase the number of tagging ice that were available, because the number of tagging operations and agendas have taken dip. So that was something quite important to note. And yeah, as a result, because Scorched Earth was gone, I had to increase the number of tech punishment cards as well. Those tier 2 tech punishment cards like Exchange and Psychographics. Those used to be one-offs. They are now increased in quantity to compensate for not having Scorched Earth. Another thing I realized was that Advanceable Ice suddenly became very good. This is Wayland's time to shine, huh? Yeah, mostly because Parasite is gone. Without Parasite, Advanceable Ice, now it's actually worth advancing Ice. It's also important to note that there's cross-faction support. You normally can't play a Ward Bait with Advanceable Ice viably, but in Cube Draft you can. Same thing with Trick of Light, you don't have to worry about influence concerns. And because of these critical mass of advancement synergizing cards, Advanceable Ice suddenly become quite good. In the 3 Swiss rounds we played, 2 of my opponents actually end up advancing their Ice against me. So that is a testament to how viable Advanceable Ice is in the new cube. Finally, no Jackson Howard, the biggest Corp side loss, or is it? Cube Draft, yeah, fundamentally Cube Draft exists without Jackson Howard. It's unlike standard constructed play where every single Corp deck has 3 Jackson Howard. With Cube, that's not the case. As such, the loss of Jackson Howard is actually not that big of a deal. If anything, the Corp isn't really affected very much because with the reduction in the number of gender points needed to win, quite a few Corps actually prefer to go fast anyway, which Jackson Howard, doesn't have that much of an impact with. So ultimately, yeah, the Corp side actually escaped pretty unscathed, I should say. The only big change was with Tag and Bag. Most of the economy was replaceable. The rotating economy was replaceable. You lose blue level in sweeps, but you have newer cards like Lateral Growth, Advanced Assembly Lines, and the new clearances as well. So Corp side wasn't really affected that much. The runner side, however, was a whole different ballgame. The first thing I immediately realized was that mid-range economy took a huge blow. Now there's many ways to categorize economy cards. First, you have the OP econ cards, those that you see in every competitive deck out there. Your Temujin, your Blue Moose, your Magnum Opus. These are banned in my Cube Draft for the obvious reason that I do not think it is fun if drafting a single one of these cards basically settles your entire economy suite. That seems dumb. And yeah, Cube Draft is meant to be a refreshing experience, a departure from standard play. So not having these OP economy cards available seems like the way to go. Once you take these powerful econ cards out of the picture, you actually realize something. They actually didn't really print that many runner econ cards in the recent cycles, and this became a huge problem because a lot of good runner mid-range econ cards were being removed due to rotation. When I say mid-range, what I mean is something like strong, unsustainable economy. Cards that give you a finite amount of money, but it is a sizable quantity, probably more than a sure gamble, but less than something that drips clicklessly for the rest of the game. So KD Jones sat at that very sweet spot. It's theoretically infinite money if the game goes on long enough, but because you can only spend 1 click a turn loading up KD and taking money off KD, I felt that KD was one of the most balanced economy cards that we've ever seen, and it's really sad that she's going. Because there's basically nothing that replaces KD Jones, if you think about it in recent cycles. Same thing with Lucky Fire and Queen's Gambit. These are relatively click intensive, but give you a decent chunk of money for playing 1 card. These cards were not replaced either. Instead, what we got was a bunch of conditional drip economy. From the Mumbai cycle, I think we have like Tech Trader, and then moving on, we have things like, let me try to jog my memory here. I can't. Yeah, I'm straining my mind to think of cards that give such economy. So yeah, it's just a big problem. So and you end up having really polarized economy cards. You have those burst econ cards, the weak ones like Career Fair and Modded. And all the way on the other end of the spectrum, you have these conditional econ cards like Underworld Context, Data Folding. Yeah, they are decent econ cards, but they are very boring. Something like a Beth, that's so boring. You just play it and it gives you passive econ. It is in my Cube Draft, but I wanted something more interesting. So this was the biggest problem, finding interesting economy cards. However, runners did pretty well in terms of card draw. It actually improved because there was very little card draw to begin with in Spin and Genesis. Runners were struggling for card draw back then. It's pretty bad when one of the best card draw mechanisms ends up being John Masnori. In contrast, in recent data packs and big boxes, we've gotten strong card draw on hardware, tacked onto hardware in the form of Ubax Daredevil, as well as probably the strongest card draw in Laguna Velasco, your Magnum Opus equivalent. So yeah, you can see a difference between Laguna Velasco versus Magnum Opus. Velasco is finite. You will eventually run out of deck. Magnum Opus, on the other hand, is infinite. You can just take 8 every single turn. This is why I eschew Opus while Velasco stays. What about breakers? First thing you notice is that there are actually no good decoders outside of Stealth. Stealth decoders are incredibly efficient. Everything else sucks. That's mostly because York has rotated. And while York was arguably bad design, it filled a very important niche in the cube draft. It is not that overpowered if you are not guaranteed to have data suckers to go with it, to have your net ready eyes to go with it. And yeah, it is a challenge to draft York support in addition to the York itself. So it is fairly balanced in cube draft. The same can't be said for standard play, which is why the decision was presumably made to remove it from Core 2.0. Still, it's quite sad from the perspective of cube draft because that removes a rather viable decoder. What else do we have left? The recent cycles only gave us Inversificator, which, in my opinion, is pretty oppressive. There's very little counterplay the Corp can do, short of just throwing away all their code gates, because Inversificator just messes so much with your ice placement, which is a big deal, considering that most cube draft decks rely on ice. So to me, Inversificator was an unacceptable include in the cube draft. As such, with code gate breakers being mediocre, the only way out was, instead of boosting the decoders, why not attack the code gates on the Corp side instead? I end up not including most of the powerful code gates that were released in recent cycles, your Fairchilds, and only one DNA tracker. So there you go. This is how you balance the cube draft. If you can't fix things on one side, try to fix them from the other. It is an asymmetric game after all. The good news, however, is that in general, icebreakers have diversified. Previously, the Birmingham Cube included quite a few 2-off breakers, but now, the recent cycles have seen a lot of breakers being printed, and a lot of them have very interesting users. You have the Crim breaker suites, the birds, for example, the derezzing birds, as well as the trash to bypass breakers. Those are very interesting breakers that have a lot of potential in cube draft. You have the wonky Anarch breakers, those that cannot be pumped. You know, your Nerfer, your Sinia. You also have Persephone, which is actually interesting in cube draft. Not to mention all the tier 2 AI breakers. So there are all these breakers with a lot of potential that have just been shafted out of competitive play in standard because of, the most efficient breakers. And like Faust, like their standard Anarch breaker suite. But in cube draft, anything goes. And if anything, these breakers have increased power levels because of the synergies brought to them, because you can splash cards from other factions for no influence. That's the important thing in cube draft. Finally, I realized that program tutors have not been affected by rotation at all. SMC is staying, special orders staying, and if anything, there's more now. There's customized secretary and there's Rosetta 2.0. So yeah, basically with card draw and tutoring improved, it seems like runners can get their breakers fairly easily now, which is quite nice, I must say. So those are my findings, and now we'll move on to talk about the cube draft I actually hosted at my local game night store. We had 6 players, and here I'll start by talking about my decks. My Corp side deck was, well, I didn't really want to play a damage based deck, but the snares kept coming around to me, and I was like, well, if no one's gonna take the snare, I guess I'll take it. I mean, firstly, it might surprise someone who's going for a deep dig on my R&D, but more importantly, I can run more safely on my opponent's corpse knowing that they don't have the snares, because I do. So very interesting. I ended up drafting all the defensive upgrades that were damage related. The black level, the price tag, I had overwriter in there to bluff an advanced agenda, which was quite important because the only 3-2 agenda I ended up drafting was the Bill. The Bill was so huge though. I scored it so many times, and there was one game where I had an Oak Town and a Bill scored, and I played a never advanced card in the remote. My opponent, having seen a lot of 3-2 agendas during the drafting phase, thought that I probably wouldn't have a 3-2 agenda, and I didn't. But what I had was a 3-1 genetic resequencing, which I then scored, and I triggered its effect to place an agenda counter on the build, bringing me up to 6 points to win the game. That came out of nowhere. I love the synergy that genetic resequencing brings, because you're able to splash cross-faction agendas in Cube, something that you can't do in regular Netrunner. So this is one of the really fun aspects of Cube, finding these lovely interactions and abusing the heck out of them. So much fun. My runner side deck, on the other hand, was basically a dream come true. I started drafting Stealth on my very first pack. On the first pass, I saw the Net Merker and I told myself, this is the runner Desperado. It's too good to give up. There's no Desperado in the Cube, so I better draft this. And it turns out that everyone basically fed me all the stealth cards. I got all the Ghost Runners, all the Cloaks, and I got all the Stealth Breakers. No one even bothered denying them for me. So as a result, I had a monopoly on them. And yeah, these were basically unstoppable breakers. The only problem though, I didn't have any multi-access at all. So I had to fight for every single agenda through single access. Tough road. So even though I had basically the perfect breaker suite, you can't really get better than a full stealth suite in Cube Draft. Unfortunately, my runner games ended up being really close. So this just goes to show you, even though you might be a decent player with an incredible runner side draft, some of your drafting flaws, such as not drafting multi-access, can come back to haunt you, and games will turn out to be a lot closer than you expect. I ended up losing one game to this really degenerate person who ended up drafting asset spam in Cube Draft. I didn't think it was possible, but they got all the assets. They got the team spawn to recur assets. They got Estelle Moon, the one Estelle Moon I put in the Cube, and the one Jeeves I put in the Cube. Those work so well together with the tour guide and AR enhanced security. Jeez, that agenda is so good when scored. So you can see all these coming into play from all different factions working very well together. I lost to them because they end up having a bunch of fast advanced cards. This was basically Moon's ETF, but a lot worse. It was not that hard to swallow though, because it's Cube Draft after all. The other one that I nearly lost to was this fast advanced deck. They started fast advancing agendas and got pretty close. I was locked out of breakers because the stupid best defense trashed my street peddler containing my only killer. Remaining killer. So I had no killer for the entirety of the game. And with an advanced ice on R&D, I couldn't run it because it might have been a Colossus or a Nebula. So I ended up having to hit HQ and their remote repeatedly, but to no avail. And they ended up doing this insane combo. At 4 agenda points, my opponent fast advanced a domestic steepers while there was a clones are not people active. That put them at 5 agenda points, and they were ready to win next turn because they could triple click the domestic sneakers for the last agenda point. So I had to Hail Mary on that last turn, and I ran HQ and got the 1-in-3 Vitruvius for the win. So very crazy nail-biting games. This is what Netrunner is about to me, and yeah, Cube Draft just brings it out naturally. It just naturally happens. I can't say more. Cube Draft is just amazing. Time to show off some other decks I didn't play against. This one was really nasty. If you thought Marcus Batty was nasty, wait till you look at the runner side. They dropped a deck deal, they dropped a Savant, and then mem strips. Using the mem strips for its clearly intended purpose to boost the strength of Savant and to give full effectiveness to deep data mining. Such synergy. Amazing. You would never see that in constructed play. What else? We have this person. I think this person had one of the best runner drafts. They basically drafted every run synergy card and it worked wonderfully. There's no Desperado in the Cube, which makes you think that run-based strats are not that good. But hey, when Every time this guy runs archives, they are getting 2 credits from sec testing. They're getting 2 data circle counters because of the double run from Doppelganger, and they get 2 virus counters on Ormaquah. That is insane value. It's their ability to charge up Sucker at Ormaquah so quickly meant that your high strength eyes were useless. Purging was useless. They could get in anywhere because they were rich thanks to sec testing. Man, that was oppressive, and data folding as well, giving them that drip econ. This deck became very oppressive very quickly. And to round things off, yes, there's an apocalypse in this deck. Nasty stuff. What else? This person here played Cipher. Now, Cipher has a really bad rap. I'm sure you all know about it. But because Parasite has rotated out Core 2.0, Cipher becomes a lot less oppressive. You can actually play some really fun strategies with it, and this guy really took it to the max. This Cipher here was used to make the Bird Breakers a lot cheaper to use. Pumping them is expensive. Cipher negates that. And to use the Bird Breakers super effectively, this person went all in on the Bird Breaker synergy. Sahasrara to install the Bird Breakers for free with the Cybersoft macro drive as well. Multi-threader to make Breaking Ice free. By the way, Multi-threader also works on the 2 credit bouncing bird ability. So yeah, basically de-resing ice is free and installing breakers is free for this runner deck. It seems really oppressive when all your ice starts getting de-res as the Corp. Oh, and did I mention this guy also drafted the one-off Kyrus McIntyre? They're getting money while de-resing your ice. Sweet! Yeah, this is a really, really sweet deck that you will never, ever, ever see in constructed play because look, there are cards from 4 different factions. Runner side, yes, 4 different factions. The Anarch Cipher, the Shaper recurring credits, the Bird Breakers from Criminal, as well as Adam's Multi-Threader. You will never see this rainbow of cards in standard play. This is what I really love about Cube. Oh, and if you notice, yes, there's one missing breaker. There's the Golden, there's the Peregrine. What happened to the Saker? I drafted it. Denied! Yeah, I felt so good when I realized that he missed out on the Saker because I denied the Saker. I just wanted a barrier breaker. I just wanted a decent barrier breaker. Was that too much to ask for? Yeah, so another fun part of cube drafting, denying your opponents their much loved and needed breakers. So yeah, going back to why you should cube draft. If this video hasn't convinced you, I'm not sure what more I can say. The lack of influence restrictions is actually a big deal. But above that, one thing that I realized big time is that a lot of standard play revolves around finding the appropriate tech cards and countering the meta. That is fun to some players, but it can be really exhausting. And tech cards, to me, sometimes feels like a case of if you have the tech card, you get a blowout victory. If you don't, you get a blowout defeat. And that's not exactly fun in terms of gameplay. When you remove tech cards completely from the equation in the very well-controlled cube draft, what you get is creativity. You can play whatever cards you want to your liking and not have to worry about someone playing degenerate net damage bullshit or asset spam bullshit. Well, there was asset spam, but you had other ways to win, right? So yeah, you don't feel forced to include certain cards in your deck just because of metagame concerns. You are not forced to include Employee Strike because what if they're playing Scorpios or Egg Infusion? None of that concern. You're just building your own synergistic deck and then trying to play it out in the game, which I feel is what Netrunner really should be about. Another really underrated point of why Cube Draft is so much fun is because of the hidden information aspect. Now, there's hidden information in both Cash Refresh and Standard play as well, but it's a very different kind of hidden information. When you're talking about the top tier competitive decks, I think one thing that most people find missing from these top tier decks is the hidden information aspect that they're used to. In Asset Spam, the hidden information aspect in the form of the face down unadvanced cards is not very fun because most of them are just assets. Same thing with CI combo. The hidden information in whether your opponent has the combo in hand or not is not that fun because you can't really get to that hidden information and, you know, it seems very random, luck based. Whereas in Cube Draft, the hidden information you have is very controlled. It comes in the form of the drafting phase where you have to decide whether you want to draft certain cards, and whether these cards have any value as hidden information. Like in my game against the asset spam player, for example, I was constantly staying out of hard-hitting news range, trying to stay above their credit level, and that was a wrong move by me because they end up not having a hard-hitting news. Conversely, I was playing against someone who looked like they were playing a rush deck, and I tried to contest their agenda early, and then they landed a very rude hard-hitting news on me, and I was tagged for the rest of the game with no ability to use net merker or professional contacts. So yeah, the ability for powerful cards to come out of nowhere because you can't anticipate the faction your opponent is running is a very strong aspect of hidden information that you have in Cube Draft that's not present in the other standard formats because of influence restrictions. A lot of standard decks have their influence heavily restricted by powerful cards being on the most wanted list. As such, there's not much room for creativity expression, but in Cube Draft, it's anyone's game. Not to mention that you can actually mitigate this advantage of hidden information by drafting well and by paying attention during the drafting phase. So yeah, there's still a skill aspect involved, even though the hidden information may seem very random. Hey, I didn't expect a snare out of you, but if you pay attention during the drafting phase, you can mitigate this somewhat. So these are things I really love about Cube Draft. And finally, as the author of the Cube Draft, you can always control degeneracy. If you think asset spam is too strong, remove some synergistic cards. If you feel that upgrades need, scoring and remotes needs more support, why not include more defensive upgrades? These sorts of things allow you to create a controlled environment where any deck you build will not be too degenerate and will be fun for all. And this is why I think Cube Draft is a really good format right now, especially with the freshness introduced with Core 2 and Rotation. So I hope this has convinced you to try Cube Drafting out for your own. Of course, I must stress that it comes with quite a lot of commitment. You have to spend quite a few hours dismantling your collection and collecting the 320 cards on each side to form your cube and counting those cards repeatedly. It is a huge chore, and this doesn't include the time spent redesigning the cube. But trust me, it is very rewarding once you do it, and I plan to host more Cube Drafts at my local game store soon. Hope you found this interesting and informative presentation. If you have any further questions on Cube Draft, don't hesitate to leave a comment in the YouTube section, or just drop me a note on Slack. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks everyone for your kind attention, and I'll see you next time. Happy net running, happy cubing. Goodbye.